Hello and welcome to World Currency Collector. Today we have our very first viewer request video. Somebody asked me to do a video on Brazil, so we're going to head down to South America and check out this amazing country. And of course, if you want to be official about it, it's called the Federative Republic of Brazil. Now, more than 206 million people call Brazil home. And about 3.2 million square miles. It's actually larger in area than the contiguous United States. That's not including Alaska, of course. And the official language in Brazil is Portuguese. Now, Brazil is a country that has suffered from many, many decades of rampant inflation. It caused their currency to change a lot of different times, and we're going to see 8 of them today just in this video. We've got a mix of banknotes that feature ink signatures, we've got overstamps, we've got portraits and poets and painters and all kinds of good things. And throughout its history, Brazil seemed to switch back and forth between printing contracts with the American Banknote Company in New Jersey and Thomas de la Rue and Company in London, as well as their own printing in Brazil. They changed colors along the way and texts and patterns along the way, and it's really an interesting history. And if you're collecting Brazilian currency, you can get very, very confused quickly. So let's take a walk backwards in time, starting with currency of today, going all the way back to the currency from 100 years ago. The present-day currency in Brazil is called the real, or in plural form, reais. Real essentially translates to royal, and today it's issued in denominations from 2 to 100. And we've got 3 examples here of the older series of real, which were issued prior to 2010. And all 3 of these feature the phrase right here on the front, Deus seja louvado, or God be praised. It's kind of like in God we trust on the United States dollars. And this phrase is controversial today because it conflicts with Brazil being a secular state, and some say the phrase violates the rights of non-Christians and non-believers. The front of these notes also features the effigy of the symbolic sculpture of the Republic of Brazil. And she's shown on all 3 of these notes. An effigy is the representation of a person in the form of a sculpture or some 3-dimensional medium. And in this case, she represents Brazil. The back of these notes feature a wildlife scene in a vertical orientation. This is the one note, which was discontinued in 2006. And on the back here, it features a sapphire-spangled emerald, which is a species of common hummingbird, feeding its chicks here in a nest. The 2 note features a hawksbill sea turtle, which we talked about previously when we did our video on New Zealand. And the 5 note here features a garza, which is a great egret, also known as a great white heron. And there's one interesting fact I want to share about this bird. When it's feeding, it kind of walks around real slow in the shallow water, and it'll stand really, really still. It waits for its prey to come within striking distance of its beak, and then it reaches out and just stabs it. It's actually kind of cool to watch. It's kind of like it just waits for its dinner to come to it. It mainly feeds on fish, frogs, and small mammals. I'd like to mention also that in 2010, Brazil released a new series of notes that are polymer, but I don't have any of those in my collection, so I can't show you those today. The modern real was introduced in 1994 when it replaced the Cruzeiro real. The Cruzeiro real was a short-lived note. It was the currency from August 1993 until June 1994. The denominations for it were 50 to 50,000, and unfortunately I don't have any of those to show you today. It replaced the 3rd Cruzeiro at a rate of 1,000 to 1. This is an example of a 5,000 mil Cruzeiros banknote that was issued in 1993. The front here features a portrait of composer Antônio Carlos Gomes. He was the first New World composer whose work was accepted by Europe, and the only non-European who was successful as an opera composer in Italy during the golden age of opera. He was the first composer of non-European lineage to be accepted into the classic tradition of music, and he lived from 1836 to 1896. Behind him in the center of the note are three figures that are part of the monument it stands next to the Municipal Theater in Sao Paulo. It represents three of Gomas's operas. The first one is O Guarani, the second is Salvador Rosa, and the third is O Escravo. The back of this 5,000 note features the piano that belonged to Carlos Gomes, alongside a statue of him. And the watermark on this note is the Liberty Head of the Republic of Brazil. The third Cruzeiro was in circulation from 1990 until 1993. The original banknotes were issued in overprints on the Cruzado Novo in denominations of 50, 100, 200, and 500. But later they issued regular notes in values from 100 all the way to 500,000. From 1989 to 1990, the Cruzado Novo was the currency in Brazil. Here we have an example of a 50 Cruzados Novos banknote with an overstamp on the front of 50 Cruzeiros, which is the third iteration, in a rectangular shape. This banknote was issued in 1989, and the front features a portrait of poet Carlos Drummond de Andrade, along with a manuscript from his famous poem, Prece de Mineiro no Rio. Behind him are images of houses and mountains in Itabira, which is his birthplace and residence. And the back of this note shows him writing at a desk. Between 1986 and 1989, the Cruzado was the currency in Brazil. This is a 100 same Cruzeiros note issued in 1989. The front features a beautiful portrait here of Cecília Benevides de Carvalho Meireles. I'm sorry about butchering her name. She's one of the great female poets in the Portuguese language, and she's widely considered one of the best poets in Brazil. Next to her are some drawings and verses extracted from her book, Canticos, or Songs, which was published in 1981. The back of this note shows images of child's fantasies along with some of her drawings representing folklore, folk music, and dances. The second Cruzeiro circulated from 1970 until 1986, and banknotes in this series were issued in values from 1 to 100,000. Originally, the first Cruzeiro notes were overstamped versions of the Cruzados in values of 1 and 50 centavos, 1, 5, and 10 Cruzeiros Novos, like you see here. This 5,000 mil Cruzados note from 1989 is overstamped with 5 Cruzados Novos in a triangle shape. The front here has a portrait of Candido Portinari. He's one of the most important Brazilian painters. He lived from 1903 until 1962 and painted more than 5,000 canvases. And behind him, behind the overstamp, is a part of an unfinished engraving of the mural Tiradentes. On the back of this note, it features a portrait of him painting, and his portrait is also the watermark of this note. As part of the second Cruzeiro issue, we've got a 200 Cruzeiros note issued here in 1981. This note is kind of unique in that the images can be viewed whether you're holding the note upside right or upside down, and that goes for both sides of it as well. And I've never actually seen anything quite like that before, so that's pretty cool. Here on the front, it features a portrait of Princesa Isabel, Princess Imperial of Brazil. She lived from 1846 until 1921, and her story is actually rather tragic. After both of her brothers passed away, she was considered by the male-dominated country of Brazil to be an unsuitable heiress to the throne. In her father's absence in 1871, she signed a new anti-slavery act freeing all children of slaves born after that date, and that was a very unpopular decision in Brazil. Eventually, her family was deposed in a military coup in 1889, and she spent the last 30 years of her life in exile in France. The back of the note actually shows a picture of two freed slave women. They're cooking over a fire, and that's in tribute to her signing of the Anti-Slavery Act. Now we're going to head back in time a little bit further, and we're going to take a look at the first Cruzeiro, or the Cruzeiro Antigo, which was issued from 1942 until 1967. The very first ones were overprints on the earlier mille reis notes in values of 5 to 500, but I don't have any examples of those to show you. The regular issue banknotes started in 1943, and they were produced in values of 1 to 10,000. Here we have two examples of the two Cruzeiros banknotes. From 1942 to 1953, which is when this one was produced, each of the banknotes features a handwritten signature right across the front of the portrait, and it always seems to go from the bottom left to the upper right of the banknote. It's actually an ink signature, and it took me quite a bit of research to figure out why these notes have handwritten signatures on them. As it turns out, in order for them to be legal tender in Brazil, every single note that was produced, in this case, these were produced by the American Banknote Company, every single one had to have an individual signature of an employee in the Caixa de Amortização, which is the amortization box, basically an employee of the Treasury. And without this actual ink signature, the note was not legal tender. You will find these notes in abundance at your local coin shops or currency shows. They are all over the place. They're very inexpensive, usually less than $1, especially in circulated condition. And collectors like these because they really like the actual signatures and they look for really bold, good examples. I've never seen the same note signed by the same person. So there's lots and lots of things out there on the market, lots of examples. These two notes look very, very much the same, but they're not the same. The second version on the bottom looks similar, but there's no signature across the front because starting in 1953, the Cruzeiro notes changed to feature what they call a microchancela, or a micro seal signature. So you can see in the lower part, the director of the Treasury over here, and on the right side, the Minister of Finance. I guess they got tired of actually hand signing every single note that came through there, so they decided to put the signatures right in the design. These two notes feature a portrait of Luis Alves de Lima y Silva, better known as the Duke of Caxias. He was nicknamed the Peacemaker and the Iron Duke. He was an army officer, politician, and a monarchist in the Empire of Brazil. He lived from 1803 to 1880. And the back of these notes, which are exactly the same as one another, has a picture of the Escola Militar de Resende, which is a military school that's located in Rio de Janeiro. Here we've got two examples of the 1,000 mil Cruzeiros note. The earlier version is printed in orange, and it was printed by Thomas de la Rue in London around 1853. And then the later version here is in blue, and this one was printed by the American Banknote Company in New Jersey about 1967. This one happens to be overstamped with the one Cruzeiro Novo in a circle shape. And if you look closely, the original note right above the portrait says No Tesouro Nacional, or in the National Treasury, but it was changed later to just be Tesouro Nacional, which just means National Treasury above the portrait. Both of these notes feature a portrait of Pedro Álvares Cabral, who was a Portuguese nobleman, a military commander, navigator, and explorer. He was actually regarded as the discoverer of the country of Brazil. He lived from 1467 to about 1520. And Cabral conducted the first substantial exploration of the northeast coast of South America, and he claimed it for Portugal. He's regarded as the first captain who ever touched 4 continents, leading the first expedition that united Europe, Africa, America, and Asia. And if you look in the back of these notes, which mine are faded really badly, I believe this actually features a scene from the first Mass in 1521. But if you know for sure what it is, please leave a comment below. The first Cruzeiro replaced the old real at a rate of 1,000 to 1. This old real was issued by the Bank of Brazil starting in 1923, and they were issued until 1942 in denominations of 1 to 1,000 mil reis. This here is an example of a 1 mil reis note issued in 1923. In this original version of the real, the plural was spelled reis instead of reais, which is what it is today. This note was printed by the American Banknote Company. And across the top here, on the left-hand side, it reads, "At the headquarters of the Bank of Brazil in agreement with Law N.4635." On the right-hand side, it says, "To be paid to the bearer of this as of January 8th, 1923, in the amount of 1 mil reis." On the front of this note has an actual ink signature again, like you saw in the last series, and it features a portrait of Manuel Ferraz de Campos Sales. He's a Brazilian lawyer, a coffee farmer, and a politician who served as the 4th president of Brazil. He lived from 1841 until 1913, and his political focus was financial reform, which is quite ironic considering all of the crazy hyperinflation that we've just learned about that happened after his reign. The back of this note says Bank of Brazil across the top, and it features the coat of arms of Brazil in the center with the words Estados Unidos do Brasil and the 15th of November, 1889, which is the date the country of Brazil became a presidential republic. Now, there were several issues of banknotes prior to 1923, but unfortunately I don't have any example of those to show you today. We sure have covered a lot in this episode, though. And I have to ask, are you confused yet? I was really confused putting these together and doing the research on these different issues of banknotes. So here's a quick recap for you in case you got lost. I'd just like to mention real quick that banknotes in Portuguese are called cédulas, and Google likes to translate this in English to the word ballot, which can lead to some confusion when you're trying to research the history of their banknotes, and there is a lot to research. I mean, they've had so many different examples. I'm going to add some links below for you if you're interested in learning some more about the topics that we discussed today. And I'd really like to thank you for traveling with me today down to the incredible country of Brazil. There's so much to learn. And I'd like to say, if there's a country that you're interested in learning more about and seeing their currency, and you want to see it featured here on the channel, go ahead and leave me a message down below and let me know what you'd like to see. And I'll see you next time on World Currency Collector.